All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the meeting of the Baltimore County House Delegation on the 8th of March. It's 9 o'clock, and we have two groups that are going to present to us today, court-appointed special advocates for children known as CASA. Don't be confused. And also, we're going to have Senator Chris Van Hollen come and talk to us. And then we're going to have a bill hearing on House Bill 1495. So we'll start with the court-appointed special advocates, whom I met recently and got very excited about their program. And I know several of you know about it already. So with that, Jennifer Stein, who is the executive director, is here with us. And ma'am, you have the floor. Tell us all about you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair Eversole. Thank you to Vice Chair Jackson, Madam Speaker. Thanks for being here. We are court-appointed special advocates. Like Chair Eversole said, that's we go by CASA. We are, as you'll hear, we work with children in foster care. I know there are other CASA programs out there. We're also the Baltimore County program. So I'll go into that in just a little bit. But for brief introductions, I am Jennifer Stein. I'm the executive director. And I have with me Susan Empfinger, who's our Director of Outreach and Engagement, and she's also an alum of foster care. So I'm going to let her introduce herself briefly before we get started.
Hi, everyone. Jennifer asked me to come today because I wanted you to know kind of all sides of foster care insofar as I know them. I've been working in foster care issues with alumni specifically. So people who've gotten out of foster care, their life path, I've been working with them for about 10 years now at least. And there are some similarities that we find among ourselves. Social media has allowed us to talk a lot. And I think I can speak to why I think CASA is so important and why, as an alum of foster care, we call ourselves alumni, University of Life, why I chose to work for CASA and why I feel so strongly about the program. I wanted to just tell you that kids in foster care, I know many of you know this, and I appreciate your knowing, but we are not criminals. We are people who were removed from our homes due to abuse or neglect or the death of our guardians in some cases and our parents. And we really go through life with it's a sense of being adrift, and it's a sense of being a bit disconnected from a lot of institutions because we're moved around quite often. But once you're removed from home, I guess no connection is going to be quite the same. So I left home when I was 15. I put myself into foster care. I begged the police to take me because I was being abused. And it's not something that every child does, but it is something that I've heard many, many times. And I got to college. I got to graduate school, and still I found a need to continue to talk about my foster care experience in the hopes that people will understand that while it might not be the only cause of intergenerational poverty and despair, it is certainly a root cause. And statistics will never tell you what's the actual, cause. But I think I can safely say that foster care and being in foster care is an experience that permanently disconnects you from things like education, employment. It makes you more subject to being a drug abuser because God knows you don't want to live in your everyday reality when you have been abused and you get flashbacks and you have difficulties learning because every time you open your brain, some traumatic experience comes flooding back in. It makes you more prone to poverty. It makes you more prone to trafficking. I cannot tell you the number of times that I would have gone down that path had I not had a really responsible adult who cared about me, who did not leave my side. In that case, it was my foster parents because I'm too old to have had a CASA in my community, which was Michigan. And I feel like you can throw any program you want at somebody who's been abused or neglected, but you cannot create that relationship which will open their brains and their hearts to other possibilities that exist. So what I think CASA does is it gives you that relationship, and that relationship does not leave you. And that enables a metamorphosis that is only possible when you've got that kind of consistency. So while I can tell you that I believe very strongly, because you're going to hear about it, I know we all hear about it, about family reunification and how important it is to support those families, I will also tell you that there is always a place for foster care. There is always a place for kids like me who grew up, frankly, my mother was a narcissist and there was just no regret and there was no going back. you are always going to have kids in foster care who need that adult and who need that person who cares. And given the state of foster care right now in this country, and even in Baltimore County, I would say that CASA is an indispensable part of that equation to help resolve the issues of chronic unemployment, of intergenerational poverty and despair in all of its forms that happens every single day. And I think that that is the one area that's not being paid attention to. It's kind of an undersold issue, because I don't think you think that people like me get out of foster care, that we go to graduate school. But I can tell you, as an alum of foster care, with the right support, we are very successful people. We want to give back to our community as much as we can, because it's the community that saved us. Frankly, we never forget. I had lunch with my social worker of God knows how many years ago, last month. And I know lawyers, I know advocates, I know social workers who have gone back in and done their very best, but we need help. And I think CASA is an essential part of that help. So with that, I'll just turn it back to Jennifer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen. We do have a presentation to go along with what we're going to say, but hopefully it will be. Can everybody see that?
We have you. Excellent.
Excellent. Thank you. So hold on, let me make sure I can move this along. There we go. So we did introductions. Susan basically went into the beginning of what is foster care. Like she said, it's supposed to be a temporary safety net for kids who have been abused or neglected. Typical outcomes for kids in foster care are generally negative, right? Or at least the ones that we hear about. So it's things like, if you think about all the other societal issues that we typically think about, something like, depending on the study you look at, 75% of the adult prison population has spent time in foster care. Depending on which study you look at, somewhere between 60 and 90% of sex trafficking survivors spent time in foster care. High percentages of homeless population, low percentages of high school and college education, things like that. Those are sort of the typical outcomes for youth in foster care. And that is really what we're here to address, because we know that those things have huge ripple effects. CASA was started in 1977 by a judge who felt like he was hearing from all the different people in the system, but didn't have a really specific picture of what was going on for each individual child. And so he said, here, citizen, go and figure out what's going on for the child, form a relationship with this child, and come back to me and let me know, in addition to the things that I'm hearing from the attorneys and the social workers, who are all very well intended and working very hard, but just don't have the time. You go work with this one child and one family and come back and tell me what you think is best for them, what's in their best interest. And that's really what we do now. CASA is in Maryland statute. So we are a tool of the court. The court is able to appoint a CASA volunteer to any case that they think is appropriate. So we really are there to help out the court. And within that, we definitely provide the mentorship. A lot of times the CASA volunteer is the only person that's consistent in the child's life. Again, high turnover rates. I used to be a foster care worker. I get it. It's a very grueling job and you're usually overworked and underpaid. So there's high turnover there. There's high turnover in providers like therapists. Kids in foster care nationally on average move every 6 months. So they change homes every 6 months, which usually means they change schools, friends, support systems. But the CASA volunteer really follows them everywhere. And so they are building that trust, and they're being that consistent adult for them. So we provide that mentorship. On the other side of it, though, is that we also are uniquely allowed to provide strong individualized advocacy to really be able to speak up and give a voice to what's best for the child. We do that through forming relationships with the child, relationships with the family, and relationships with the other workers, the professionals working with the child. And because we are court appointed and we are here for the help in order to help the court, we're able to talk with doctors, teachers, therapists, social workers, biological family, foster family. We review court records and school records and medical records, and we really get a full picture. What's going on for this individual child? What do they need? What do they want? We always take that into consideration as well. And what can we advocate for in order to help get them what's best for them? And that's really the crux of what we do. I think I'm actually going to skip. I had a little video here. I'm going to skip this, but I'm happy to send it to you. It's just sort of an overview of what we do. And it's a good summary, but I know that we are limited on time. And so I'll send that to you in a follow-up email in case you want to review it. But I'm going to go on with this, which is really to the crux of what we do, in that we are a unique program. We're the only ones that can do what we do. Jurisdictionally, again, we are the Baltimore County program. And so there is no other program in Baltimore County or in the state really that can do what we do for Baltimore County children. There are other CASA programs across the state, but they are also tied to their jurisdictions. So in Baltimore County, we're the only voice for Baltimore County kids in foster care. Again, we're appointed by the court. We truly are a part of that court process. The judges look to us, the magistrates look to us, the social workers and attorneys look to us, because again, a lot of times we have more information because the volunteers are much more in touch with the children and know much more about their situations than anyone else on the case, because they have the luxury of time. We are one-to-one. Again, that goes back to that luxury of time, right? That the volunteers really are dedicated to one kid at a time, sometimes a sibling group. Occasionally we'll have volunteers that have been with us for a really long time and we'll put them on more than one case at a time, but generally they're one-to-one matched with the child. Again, I spoke about being a mentor and an advocate and being a voice for the child. So why is CASA important as a program in general? We know through studies and surveys of judges across the country that the courts feel more informed and able to make better decisions for children and families when there is a CASA on the case. Again, all the social workers, the attorneys, they're all very well intended. I did the best I could as a foster care worker, but I did not have enough time to be able to really know what's going on for each individual child and family. So the courts have more information to base these life-changing decisions on, and they report to National CASA and other people that do these surveys and studies that they really feel like they're able to make better decisions for children and families. There are better outcomes for children and families, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in just a second, especially when a CASA is appointed earlier on a case, which in Baltimore County, our judges and magistrates are starting to do that a lot more now. We're getting involved earlier and earlier on the cases, which is great because kids have better outcomes that way. And in general, when there's a CASA program and kids have CASAs on their side, there are broader and positive impacts to the community and cost savings to the community and to governments. We do about $450,000 or so worth of work through volunteer efforts every year. And so if we paid people to do all this individualized advocacy that our volunteers are doing, it would cost about an extra, $500,000 a year. And so that is a huge cost savings to the county. It also saves costs in foster care numbers because, as you'll see in a minute, some of the outcomes mean less expense to the county. So let me go into that. So these outcomes include things like less time spent in foster care, somewhere between 1.5 to 2 years on average. Kids are in foster care less time when they have a CASA on the case. Fewer placement changes. I mentioned that kids move approximately every 6 months. That happens less when there's a CASA. 50% approximately reduction in children coming back into foster care. Again, if you'll remember, foster care is supposed to be temporary, right? So kids are supposed to be able to leave foster care once whatever brought them in has been addressed in the home. Sometimes what happens is the system is not perfect and kids end up going home when the family's not ready and they come back into foster care because they are again abused or neglected. That is reduced by 50% when there's a CASA on the case. They have higher academic and behavioral performance in schools, and generally overall, they report that they have higher levels of hope, which, as we know, can make all the difference for an individual. If a child, I've worked with a child who told me he was 16 at the time, I think, and he told me he didn't expect to live past 20. So when that happens, they have no reason to try to better themselves or work hard or, go to therapy or whatever it might be. They have no reason because they don't think that they're going to live very long. They have no hope. That changes when there's a CASA involved. Our program specifically, we were established in 2000, so we're almost 25 years old. Right now, we have 13 staff, 5 are full-time, 8 are part-time. 2 of those part-time are very part-time. We have 2 people that work about 5 hours a week helping with specific things. So we're still a relatively small organization, but the majority of our staff is program staff who are people supporting the volunteers, which I'll get to in just a second. Each year we have about 165 volunteers serving approximately 190 or so children and youth. And in 2023, we served our 1,000th child. So we're very excited for that milestone, and we hope to serve 1,000 more. Those 190 children are out of 650. Baltimore County alone has about 650 children each year in foster care. What that means is that all of those 650 children were removed from Baltimore County homes. That's how they get under that jurisdiction. So they have been abused or neglected, or they call it abandoned, but sometimes just a parent has died and there's no relative to take them within our county. And they come into the foster care system and court systems here. They are ages 0 to 21. We tend to get, because we are not big enough yet to support all of the children, we get referred, and I'm putting this in huge quotes, more difficult cases. And that's because our partners trust us and know that we can manage that and that we can help with some of those more difficult cases. But so we are skewed older. So over 50% of our kids are in that older teenage range. 15% of our kids are over 18. And we have a huge focus on that. And then we have about 50-50 male, female, and predominantly almost half of our kids are Black or African American. They're in another world. I'll give you a whole speech on the disproportionality of kids of color in foster care. It's a national reality and problem. But this is approximately who our kids, the kids that have been referred to us, are. For Baltimore County CASA, this is our funding breakdown. In the last couple of years, we have been very fortunate to be able to get some increased funding through some of the federal grants that we apply for. So we are very heavy on government grants right now. That is not always the case. And it is actually, some of that is VOCA, which I'm sure that you are all very familiar with the instability of VOCA grants. So we are always trying to improve our stability by increasing our individual contributions, foundations, and local grants. Okay, so starting to wrap up, our goals are ultimately to serve all of the children in foster care in Baltimore County. All 650 could benefit. We also, like I said, have a very specific focus on our older youth. We know that when kids age out of foster care at somewhere between 18 and 21, they're allowed to stay till 21. They often have some of these poor outcomes in terms of homelessness and crime and things like that. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail real quick because we do have a proposal in front of the county for the FY25 county budget to support a position that we call our youth engagement specialist. This position we created in 2020, which I always say was terrible timing. But we created the position to be able to do 2 things. One is to support our older youth and the volunteers working with them while they're in foster care, starting at age 14, providing resources and supports. But this position is also unique. I only know of one position or one CASA program in the country that has this aspect of it. She is also working with our youth after they leave care. There is a huge gap in services. Kids who reach 21 are pretty much just left on their own all of a sudden. Doesn't always happen that way, but a lot of times it does. And there's a huge need. They're also often are continuing to struggle with many of the same issues. And so we're trying to provide those supports, and we have seen a huge need. Kids are coming back to us. We're still working with a 30-year-old because she still requires help, and the typical systems in place don't catch them. So we have submitted a proposal to get some funding to make that a full-time position and provide some supports around it. So again, to do these things, we need volunteers. Our volunteers come from all of the districts in the county. We've been super excited and lucky to have volunteers appear at the town hall budget meetings and help us talk to the county and council members about, my timer just went off. I'll be done in just a second. To talk to the county about why CASA is important and why the county should fund us at a budget level, so that we can continue to be a service to the county and the community. But our volunteers do phenomenal work working with these children. Raising awareness is always a huge thing for us. So if we leave here today and you go talk to someone about CASA and getting involved, that's amazing. And then funding. And this is the structure that I started to mention before, which I think is really important for you to understand in terms of our funding and our ability to serve children. National CASA gives us a required standard that a full-time staff person can support 30 volunteers. And so that is and it's prorated for part-time people. So we can't go over that, which means we are always pretty much at capacity for the staff that we have. So to serve more children, I have to be able to bring on more volunteers, but to bring on more volunteers, I have to be able to increase our staff size. So that's really the only way that we can grow and serve more children. I already talked about the aged out youth as being a high priority. The other thing I just want to quickly bring to your attention, if you're not already aware, is the huge placement crisis that's happening. It's national, it's statewide, but it's also very, very local to Baltimore County. We have kids staying in, I'm sure you've probably heard about the hotel overstay, but the reality is that's not a hotel problem, it's a placement problem. I'm sorry, hospital overstay, which is not a hospital problem, it's a placement problem. And a lot of kids are not only staying in hospitals too long, they're also being placed in hotels with an individual, I put in quotes, staff person to sort of babysit them 24 hours a day. It's not safe, it's not appropriate, and they're not getting the services and supports that they need. I'm happy to talk to each of you individually more about that issue if you're interested. So this is really where we end. The ways that you can help supporting our proposal to the county. We really appreciate you having us here to keep foster care in the state discussion. That's a huge deal. Allocating funds to the areas of concern, like the placement issue. And then I'm just going to put out there, we are always looking for board members and volunteers. If you yourself can't do it, we know you have phenomenal networks and friends and family. We would love for you to keep us in mind as opportunities for you when you're done in your current role, or anyone that you feel like could be beneficial to the children of Baltimore County. And that's us.
Ms. Stein, thank you so much for that presentation. People often ask me what I really enjoy about this job, and there are a number of things, but one of them is that I find out about programs and people that I didn't know existed before, and I'm always impressed by the things going on. And this is a new one for me. And I know that that we've discussed the possibility of us volunteering. My wife, is working on a novel where she was doing some research about foster care, and this is why
I love it.
You came to our attention because the kind of supports kids have. So thank you so much for what you do, and thank you for being here today. You've done a pretty good job of covering it, but if any delegates have questions for Ms. Stein, I would be happy to let you have them. It's anybody have anything they're curious about? You're not a highly controversial thing here, so you might not pay attention.
We are a bipartisan issue.
I know. I would say that's absolutely true. All right, then. Thank you all for being here and listening in, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
And I don't have her name, but Miss Effinger, I believe, written down. But thank her also. Susan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Sorry, there. I see it now written. Gotcha.
No worries.
I'm so glad that you guys came and let us know the good programs. I'm sure some of us will share this out with other people and let them know about it, so that maybe your volunteerism or a board member will pop up. And also at the same time, we can advocate with the county. So
thank you very much. Are we allowed to stay and observe the rest of the meeting?
You certainly can.
Excellent.
Usually you can watch these offline, but since you've come and you're here, we're not gonna make you switch over. You can.
Well, thanks.
Yes.
I'll be on mute. I'll turn off my camera.
Perfect. That's what I was going to ask. Thank you very much. And so now I'm going to check with Justin. We don't have a senator yet. All right. So we're going to go ahead and take care of business then before Senator Van Hollen gets here. We're going to move to the bill hearing part of our agenda. And we're taking a look at a bill that has come out of rules, House Bill 1495, which is a bill by Delegate Naraki about out-of-state vehicles and registrations. Delegate Naraki, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Chair, 1 second, just gathering my notes here. All right.
Yeah, I know I caught you a little off guard there.
No, I'm good, Mr. Chair. I'm ready to go.
Good.
Moving here for us. All right. So for the record, I am Delegate Ryan Araki requesting a favorable report on HB 1495, the Baltimore County out-of-state vehicles improper registration, which is co-sponsored by bipartisan members of our delegation across the county. Most of the members of the Baltimore County Council have also indicated in a letter of support, which I believe is in our testimony here, that they support this legislation as well. This bill will provide Baltimore County another tool to address the Virginia license plate issue that I'm sure many of you have heard about, which has resulted in uninsured motorists driving on our roadways. It is enabling legislation that allows Baltimore County the option to tow vehicles that are improperly tagged per the timeframes that are already outlined in state law. We're not looking to change any of those timeframes that are already inside of state law. After an investigation occurs from the MVA has an investigatory body that can assess whether a vehicle should be properly tagged with a Maryland tag. And then Baltimore County can determine at that point if they wish to tow the vehicle. This bill will not affect those who are in Maryland and have an out-of-state tag for a legitimate reason. This could be folks that are in the military, traveling healthcare workers, like traveling nurses and things like that, students at local colleges or universities, or others that are here for legitimate purposes. Those individuals are already protected inside of the law. It will not impact those individuals. It simply provides a tool to close a loophole that exists because Maryland residents currently can get a Virginia license plate without being a resident of Virginia. In Virginia, you can currently pay a fee in lieu of insurance. So essentially, you can pay a fee and not have insurance on your vehicle. While Virginia is potentially going to be closing this loophole in July, there are other states that have a similar loophole, such as New Hampshire. My concern is that when Virginia closes this loophole, we will then see people driving around with New Hampshire license plates in Baltimore County and throughout Maryland roadways. Recently, a constituent called our office to report an incident in his neighborhood. He has seen 6 vehicles with Virginia tags parked by a neighbor's home for much longer than 60 days, which is what's outlined inside of the law, the appropriate time to update your tag. He called the MVA to report the out-of-state tags, and an inspector came from the MVA to review the incident. The MVA issued a citation after determining that this Maryland resident had not properly registered their vehicle and used this Virginia loophole. The MVA ultimately removed these illegal tags. However, within a week, all of these cars had new Virginia tags back on the vehicle. So clearly the MVA is having a difficult time because of their enforcement powers from being able to kind of completely wrap their hands around this issue. The county would still rely upon MVA investigators to determine if a vehicle is properly tagged or not properly tagged in Baltimore County. And as I said, while Virginia tags are the biggest culprit at the moment, New Hampshire has a similar policy that does not require auto insurance, and there may be other states that have somewhat similar policies as well. This bill simply aims to eliminate any potential misconduct associated with those that could be driving without insurance on our roads. And also something else to note is that these vehicles, when they do not have a tag, they're not subject to our emission standards as well in Maryland. So they're also not complying with our emission standards as well. And the statewide registration requirement is in place. I'm sorry, a statewide registration requirement is in place to ensure that vehicle owners are in compliance with critical motor vehicle laws. This is something that MVA already has. These laws include emissions testing, insurance requirements, administrative penalties for citations, and other measures intended to promote public safety. Many of these cars are driving the county streets, causing accidents that could result in hit and runs and other incidents where folks do not have insurance. So for all of these reasons, I ask for a favorable report on HB 1495. I also do want to point out that this bill is in an identical posture to a bill from the Baltimore City delegation that has already been moved through Baltimore City delegation and has already had a hearing in ENT, which I think was a relatively favorable hearing yesterday. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will turn it over. I believe we may have Councilman Ertel on as well.
We do. Thank you. We jumped out of order a little there. And, you know, when you have one of the 100 senators in the nation, and he has found his way into our room, and I will say with my tongue in my cheek that we are pleased to have him in our room this time. We're pleased to have him here. We're going to suspend the hearing. I see a lot of questions, so I don't really feel like we should make senators sit through all of those. And so we're gonna suspend the hearing briefly. I'll wait for you can all, well, let's put the hands down so that in case you have questions for the senator, and then we'll come back to the witnesses to talk on the bill that Delegate Rocky has heard, and then we will allow questions for that after this. So with that, we shift into a higher gear, and we go to Senator Van Hollen. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. So please, you could make it, and you have the floor, sir.
Well, Chairman Ebersol, thank you. Thank you for your leadership, and to all of you as part of the Baltimore County delegation. Thank you for what you're doing in Annapolis. You get an awful lot amount done in 90 days, and you certainly are a lot more efficient than the United States Congress in getting stuff done for the people of Maryland. Last night here on the Hill, of course, we had the State of the Union address. I think the president did a good job laying out both the accomplishments of the past number of years and the way forward. But I wanted to check in with you this morning just to give you a report on some of the things we're doing, some of the things we're not, and just keeping open the lines of communication, because obviously what we do at the federal level has an impact on your work in the state. And of course, we share constituents. And so there are many occasions where we have constituent matters that we work with you on at the federal level. And I do want to recognize Jessica Clayton, who's my regional director for Baltimore County, and sort of my eyes and ears when I cannot be myself in Baltimore County. But at the outset, I want to very briefly also just salute two of my federal delegation colleagues who are retiring at the end of this term. One of them, my friend and partner in the United States Senate, Ben Cardin, who has, as all of you know, really committed himself to public service, a national leader, but never forgets about Maryland and Baltimore County, and Dutch Ruppersberger, who of course was county executive in Baltimore County, and every day is thinking about how he can deliver for Baltimore County from the United States Congress. So I do want to thank them. They've been great partners. We're going to miss them, but we're going to keep them at work for the remainder of this year. So let me give you a very brief report on where we are. And today there's some good news. I mean, it's all relative, but the good news is today we will pass appropriations bills, 6 appropriations bills dealing with about half of the federal government agencies. It's, as you probably know, we're in this very turbulent, polarized period of time where just keeping the government open has been a challenge, much bigger challenge than it should be. Our fiscal year began last October 1st, so we're well into our fiscal year. We sort of had the federal budget on automatic pilot for this fiscal year. In other words, we just carried over last year's appropriations for these federal agencies. If we hadn't done that, we would have had a government shutdown. But now we're finally getting to prioritizing the budget for the fiscal year, which is important. And the other 6 bills and the rest of the federal government agencies, we have to wrap up by March 22nd. And I mention that because one of the big federal agencies that's part of that bill is the Social Security Administration, which of course is a huge employer in the Baltimore County area. And of course, the folks who work at the Social Security Administration are there to help people and process Social Security benefits. So that appropriation is in the next tranche, which we hope to get done by March 22nd. And collectively, these 2 bills have in them about $13 million in congressionally directed funds for important public purposes in Baltimore County. The bill that we'll vote on today, Friday, has $9 million in what we call congressional directed spending for various projects in Baltimore County. Just to give you a flavor of some of them, it includes $500,000 for the Road to Freedom Cycling and Pedestrian Trail, connecting 13 historical sites from the Hampton National Historical Site to the Carver Community Center. It includes $963,000 for Franklin Square Medical Center to address behavioral health and substance use disorder and address youth violence issues. So those are a couple examples of the over $9 million in congressionally directed funds right now. And I would say to all of you, this is the end of our fiscal year 24 process, but we will begin this whole process again for fiscal year 2025. And so we do try to get the word out to local nonprofits, especially who do good work, many of them along with your efforts, if they're interested in submitting these requests for the federal earmark process. I mean, this is the federal earmark process. We restored it. And I will say that one of many reasons for making sure that we get appropriations, fresh appropriations for the fiscal year that we're in, rather than going on to a continuing resolution, is if we don't, all of these $13 million in projects dedicated to Baltimore County would be wiped out if you just go on automatic pilot. So that is why, among many reasons, it's important that we get this work done. Now, while this year we're sort of just trying to clear the minimum bar necessary through ongoing appropriations. The president spoke last night about many of the other things we'd like to do, but he also spoke about many of the things we were able to do in the first 2 years of the Biden administration. And those benefits are flowing right now to Baltimore County. So I just want to mention a couple of them. So when you're talking to people in the community, you can mention some of those initiatives that are having a direct impact on their lives. We were able to secure, as a result of the Infrastructure Modernization Bill and the Inflation Reduction Act and other major federal initiatives passed during the first 2 years of the Biden administration, we secured $47 million for improvements to Baltimore County's offshore wind manufacturing hub at Trade Point Atlantic, along with federal dollars for workforce training, good paying jobs in the area of clean energy and offshore wind. And the infrastructure bill also made possible the federal funds for the Baltimore Beltway South interchange and the 695 I-70 interchange, the Triple Bridges project. So these are federal funds flowing because of the infrastructure bill that we passed in those first 2 years. As all of you well know, a lot of flooding issues in Baltimore County. We're obviously having to deal in many ways with impacts of climate change and other weather patterns. So we are working to update the National Flood Insurance Program. We also worked with some of you on some very local, micro-local issues, like access to the federal mail and postal service system at Fort Howard Post Office. While we were not able to prevent the closing of the entire branch, we did work with many of you to make sure that the people living in that area would continue to get a high priority mail. I was going to mention one other thing before I open it up to any questions you may have, and that's in the area of public safety. Over the last couple of years, working with Senator Cardin, Congressman Ruppersberger, and others, we've been able to secure more federal resources for federal law enforcement in the Baltimore area, including 5 new associate U.S. attorneys, 4 new FBI agents, together with 2 intelligence analysts, 4 new DEA agents, and 2 new AFT agents. Those are just some of the highlights. Again, this year has been obviously a tough year at the federal level, but we hope to be able to at least accomplish the things I mentioned, and then move on from there to address issues that the president mentioned. Again, I want to thank the whole Baltimore County delegation, also Speaker Jones. It's great to see you. Thank you for all your leadership in the Maryland House of Delegates, Speaker Pro Tem Stein. And I'll just close by saying, having served in the Maryland General Assembly, I have such fond memories of what you're able to do in that 90-day period. Obviously, you're working with constituents all year round, but I always marvel at the ability to get those things over the finish line in 90 days. And so thank you for what you do. Thank you for the chance to just say a few words. I am happy to try and answer any questions you've got.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for being here. Necessity is the mother of invention. When you have 90 days, you get it done in 90 days. I wonder if we had 120 or what we would do, but we've got the rhythm and we do it well. And thank you for noticing that. I'm going to start off with a question of my own, because I know you're going to get asked this, because we're from Baltimore County, and one of the concerns is that we have Martin State Airport in Baltimore County, and there's a maybe already a done deal, but there's a move to retire the A-10 Warthog, which would render the Air National Guard there without a machine. And so you're certainly going to be queried by somebody in the group here about where you think we stand on that, because we consider that an important asset in the county. So if you could talk about that.
Yes, indeed. And I was going to raise it myself, but I expected it would be
well, I thought I would just get right to it on that.
So let me say this has been an ongoing battle. I can't tell you how many hours that Senator Cardin, myself, Congressman Ruppersberger has spent on this issue over the last year, because it's actually was sort of previewed some time ago by the Air Force with respect to the Maryland National Guard mission, especially the air mission of A-10s. So we have been, the good news is the Maryland National Guard has a sort of unique specialty in the area of cyber, and that is a growth area. I'm going to come back to the air mission. That is a growth area. Obviously, we are the state that is home to to Fort Meade, which is, of course, the home of NSA and the National Cyber Security Cyber Mission. And so this is a growth area for the Maryland National Guard to be sort of uniquely designated to be able to address those issues, those really important challenges for our country, especially in the 21st century. The cyber mission is going to be essential. But from the start, we have said, yes, we want to grow the cyber mission. We want those opportunities for the Maryland National Guard, but we also want to keep an air mission. And the Air Force has had this plan that they've been working on for some time to consolidate air missions. So there are other states that are now next that the Air Force wants to take away their air missions. So the way we have it now, though, after multiple conversations with the Secretary of the Air Force over quite a period of time, is that they have agreed to work with us to identify a follow-on air mission. So not the A-10s, there are a number of different air missions that are possible. And so obviously timing is an issue here. So we are working with them right now, including a conversation just about 2 days ago, to try to identify a follow-on air mission for the Maryland National Guard. So that's where we are. The good news is the cyber piece will grow, but on the other hand, we are disappointed with the A-10 decision. This is a national phase out of A-10s as part of the National Guard. And so that's why we want to work with them to identify a follow-on air mission.
Well, it's great news to hear that that you're seeing a path forward here. It looks like the path backward might not be the one that we can go on. That's what we've been kind of hearing. So I'm so pleased that you're carving out a possible new space in that area. So thank you very much for that. Okay, I want to say I see 5 hands up. Keep your preambles short and your questions succinct because the senator has to leave at 10 o'clock. And I want to try to get you all in for your questions here. So we'll start with Delegate Cardin. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Senator. You're doing a great job. I'm giving blood right now. So I appreciate being able to do
we all
two things
feel like that
once.
metaphorically.
Yes.
Okay. Just first of all, I'm going to talk to you offline about Israel and the Middle East, because I know we've had some issues with my community and concerns about some things, but I just want to give you the kind of forewarning that I'm going to probably reach out to you offline. I wanted to get partisan for 1 second and say, if the election doesn't go the way of the Democrats in a few months, is there any preparation? I'm thinking mostly about like the United States Postal Service and other agencies that saw during the previous Trump administration some serious abandonment that has caused major grief in particularly Baltimore County. And I'm thinking of the Postal Service as an example, but there may be others as well. Maybe the Veterans Administration is another example. If you can just talk about whether there's any preparations on what's going to happen there.
Sure. Look, I look forward to talking to you about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. And, I thought the president spoke well to this issue last night. The United States stood with the people of Israel after the horrors of October 7th and have fully endorsed Israel's right to defend itself against the terror perpetrated by Hamas. But at the same time, that does not justify the humanitarian disaster right now in Gaza. And the president spoke to that as well last night. And I was pleased to hear him talk about increasing U.S. Humanitarian assistance, and also calling upon the Netanyahu government to open more corridors for access for humanitarian assistance. So I do look forward to talking to you about all of that. In terms of the next minute, look, I think the president last night laid out a vision for the country, and obviously I'm just speaking for myself now because I know we have a bipartisan delegation here, but I think that it's really important that the president be able to continue that agenda going forward. And so I don't want to, speculate as to what might happen if the former president were to win again. I think the president himself, President Biden, laid out many of the problems and challenges we would face. That would, of course, include the issues that you just raised, John. But I think those issues would be part and parcel of a much bigger challenge that we would be facing under those circumstances. I mean, look, the post office, we are now, we are, as you know, we made substantial progress over the last many months in restoring its capabilities and services, and we will certainly continue that effort, regardless. And the Veterans Administration as well. I mean, one of the major bills that we passed during the first 2 years of President Biden's administration was the Veterans Healthcare Act that allowed finally for veterans who'd been exposed to toxic agents in places like Iraq and Afghanistan to get the help and support they need. That was a very, very important bill. The president mentioned it last night, the PACT Act. The good news is that is already in place, and no future administration will be able to undo that.
Thank you, Senator. Delegate Bhandari, a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'm grateful for the outstanding constituent service you and your office provide, Senator. Your tenure in public service from the General Assembly to the U.S. Senate, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic as a global advocate and leader, has been marked by your steadfast commitment to equal rights, justice, and opportunity, impacting both domestic and international sphere are incredible. Reflecting on President Biden last night address, which aligns with your priorities, how will your experience in promoting democracy globally and supporting our global partners in Indo-Pacific region influence your future initiative in the U.S. Senate?
Well, Delegate Bhandari, Harry, good to connect with you, and thank you for your work in this area. Even as a member of the Maryland General Assembly, I know you've been working on these issues, and it was good to see you when I visited Nepal last year. And that's one small example of our efforts to make sure the United States promotes democracy around the world. The biggest issue we're facing right now in the United States Congress, of course, is Vladimir Putin's onslaught and attack on the people of Ukraine, attacking their sovereignty, attacking their democracy. And the president, of course, opened up his remarks last night with a very forceful call upon the House of Representatives to pass the bill that's already passed the United States Senate that would provide the people of Ukraine with the weapons they need to defend themselves against Putin's onslaught. And it is not just about defending Ukraine, although that is important and making sure they have the means to defend themselves. If we abandon the people of Ukraine, if we betray that commitment, I can assure you that our allies around the world will not trust us and our credibility, and our adversaries around the world will be cheering. They are watching very, very closely what's happening. President Xi in China, you can be sure that he has one eye on Taiwan and the other eye on Ukraine, watching what's closely happening. And I can tell you, speaking with leaders from Japan, leaders from South Korea, they are watching very closely whether the United States and, of course, NATO continues to provide the military equipment that Ukraine needs to defend itself. So this is a very important moment in history. The president was right to open his remarks last night by recalling other very important moments in world history. This is one of them, and nobody should underestimate the urgency and historical nature of this moment.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Delegate McCaskill.
Good morning. I'll be extremely brief. All hail to you, Mr. Senator, for the good work, the great work, actually. But I want to bring it back to a little local issue closer to home. The Liberty Road Post Office, the Gwen Oak Post Office at Liberty Road and Northern Parkway. I want to see if perhaps my office can connect with your office, because although I've been a little bit out of the loop of the conversations that's happening in our district about the concerns around the post office, I know that associations have been meeting and they're waiting for us to get back into the district to hammer us about moving forward with or without the post office and all of the issues. Are you, perhaps your office and, you all could give us some leadership as to where you think, the conversations need to lead for the near future for that post office?
Well, Delegate McCaskill, it's good to see you even virtually, and hope to see all of you in person soon. But thank you for raising that issue. It is definitely on our radar screen in terms of the post office at that location. I'm going to ask Jessica Clayton, who's here with us, to follow up with you in terms of next steps and what we can do together.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Stay safe, Senator.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Delegate, for advocating on behalf of that. I will. This is a chance for me to say that Jessica Clayton's a great person to connect with when you need service from Senator Van Hollen's office. She has been in Baltimore County for a very long time and understands our issues intimately. And so I'm sure that the Senator would agree that she's the go-to at this point.
She is indeed.
Okay.
Our
There you go.
ambassador to Baltimore County. And
She is. She's Delegate Metzger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Van Hollen, for being here. You've covered a couple of things that I wanted to mention to you. Again, you'll remember that we worked very closely with you and Congressman Ruppersberger for the Dundalk Post Office and kind of getting that straightened out. But unfortunately, it's Essex and Dundalk is kind of sliding back into where they were before. So I just bring that to your attention. The other thing, good working with you for Martin Airport as well. Franklin Square Hospital, MedStar, you quoted the number and I couldn't write it down fast enough. If you could remind me of that. And then the infrastructure in Baltimore County is so very needed. Thank you for that. When do you think those funds will be released and how many jobs will that produce?
Well, goodness. Well, first of all, Delegate Metzger, it is good to see you. I remember we were together at the Dundalk Post Office years ago at the height of the problem. I'm sorry to hear that problems may be arising again, and we look forward to working with you to address those before they get worse, before they get back to where they are. With respect to the funds for the hospital, this was a particular request that the hospital made. So I believe it's about $500,000, a little more. It was for a particular program dealing with substance use disorder and behavioral health for young people as part of their effort to address. But I can also make sure that Jessica gets you the exact figures on that. Look, I think you have a sense of just how big these transportation projects are that I cited. These are major projects in Baltimore County, millions and millions of federal dollars flowing since the passage of the infrastructure bill. As to exactly how many jobs it will produce, I don't know the exact number, excuse me, but I do know that these are hundreds, if not thousands, during the period of the projects in good paying jobs, good paying union jobs. So I do think it's a very important example of how the infrastructure modernization bill is making a big difference. I know you're facing challenges at the state level in terms of the overall transportation budget. I'll just say, without the $8 billion that's coming to the state of Maryland over the next 5 years from the infrastructure bill, it would be a much worse problem at the state. The projects that are being funded now are the result of a federal state partnership, and without those funds from the infrastructure bill, neither those projects nor the good paying jobs that come with them would be there.
Well, thank you so much. So if you don't ask, you don't get. So I need to ask you, do you think we can get some more money on the transportation? I'm in appropriations, so I'm asking that for a purpose.
No, I understand. Well, there will be the regular ongoing annual federal funds for federal transportation projects, and that's a sizable figure. I can get you the exact details. That is going to be part of the bill, actually, the appropriations bill that we passed. It's also an ongoing authorization at the federal level. But what was special about the infrastructure modernization bill was it was a big bump up during the next 5 years on top of that money that flows regularly under the federal transportation program. So it was a much needed boost at not just roads and bridges, but ports and airports, Amtrak, you know, a lot of major projects, including, for example, the old B&P tunnel, now going to be called the Frederick Douglass Tunnel, which will cut the Amtrak rail time between Baltimore and DC down to approximately, they say, a half an hour, which I think will be a big benefit to the Baltimore region as a whole. That's just one of many projects in our state that's benefiting from the infrastructure bill. I mean, it's as will our port. And by the way, also broadband build out and more affordable access within Baltimore County. That's also benefiting from the infrastructure bill, as well as other measures we passed in the previous 2 years.
Well, thank you. I know you've got to run, but I hate to cut you off because I enjoy talking with you.
Thank you, Delegate Metzger. We have time for 2 more quick questions. I see 2 hands up. Just try to make the questions quick and make them yes or no. No, I'm kidding, but make them. Let's move with some alacrity here. You're up, Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, I'll be very quick. Thank you for all of your amazing work with the Air National Guard there at the base. I represent that area of Baltimore County. And really happy to hear that news today about a future flying mission being there. My question is, we've read that the A-10s may be starting to go away as early as this fall. So I'm concerned about losing some of these great men and women with tons of experience that are pilots in sort of that in-between time when there may not be a mission identified. Do you have any thoughts on how we may keep some of those folks engaged so we don't lose them before we get this new flying mission at the air base there?
Well, again, good to see you. And you put your finger on exactly the kind of questions that we are pressing the Secretary of Air Force on right now. And we hope to identify prospects for those jobs. Now, you know, they're laying out a plan where some of those jobs, some of them would be, you know, transferred to this new mission, at least as the A-10s are phased out. What we have pointed out to them repeatedly, and you're raising this issue, is, you know, if you're a pilot or if you're a mechanic that is, you know, helping service A-10s, I'm not sure that transition will be so easy, or if it's even possible. So we are working on this on an urgent basis. We've been working to try to forestall this overall plan for a long time. But the Air Force has made a decision nationally, you know, on the A-10s to phase them out. And so this is identifying a follow-on in a time period that addresses the concerns you're raising has been our priority. I have to tell you, we are working on it. I don't want to represent that we've got an answer yet. But we look forward to working with you. I welcome any ideas you have. Please, you know, let me know directly. Let Jessica know. We're on this, but we haven't solved the issue you've raised just now.
All right, and Senator, if you can stay for one more question, I hope. We have our go-to guy at the end, Delegate Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator, it's always good to see you. You know the work that I do. DEI is under attack, and there has been a recent decision in Texas. Is there a legislative fix for some of the actions that are taking place? Because I think ultimately it may impact us here in Maryland as it relates to programs that focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right, and you're talking about this primarily in the area of small business contracting?
Yes.
Yeah. So look, I mean, we're still dealing with the fallout from the earlier Supreme Court decision dealing with affirmative action and the implications of how that decision was structured. We are looking, and I can assure you, President Biden and his administration are working hard to make sure that we continue to be able to lift up all small businesses, including those that have been historically left behind. I mean, that is why we have those programs to begin with. That's why we have the minority business program at the Department of Commerce. It's why the Small Business Administration has these programs. It's because of the history of minority small businesses not getting their fair share and fair shake. So if you look at the bills that have been passed by the president, achieving the issue of fairness that you just put your finger on has been a priority. These court cases obviously raise questions that we're going to have to address, both first of all, contesting them in the courts, but also looking for ways to adapt in the event we see a bad result. But so it's a two-pronged strategy. Fighting this in the court, saying this was not the right interpretation of the earlier Supreme Court decision, but also looking for ways to address it, as we are right now in the area of higher education, trying to still maintain the benefits of those earlier programs, but by restructuring.
I think that's a silent thank you from Delegate Phillips. And I know that you're pressed, and we have pushed you 7 minutes past your limit, but we appreciate you stretching out. I'm sure your staff's going crazy. And
That's all right.
I know sometimes we do what we want, right? And this is what you wanted. We're pleased to have you here. We appreciate your candid answers on a number of different questions. I for one, am impressed by your ability to understand our local issues, from post offices to airports. And we're pleased to have you here today. We're going to cut you loose so you continue to do the good work in Washington. And thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. And I also just want to say to Delegate Phillips and any other members of the delegation on any issue, federal issue or local issue, please connect with us. We are easily reachable and available. Mr. Chairman, Delegate Ebersol, thank you. Always good to see you. And wish you all a very successful completion of your session.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we will restart the bill hearing on House Bill 1495. We've had testimony from the sponsor, Delegate Naraki. We have a few people online who are interested in testifying on that. And first is our very own Councilman Mike Ertel. We give 2 minutes for testimony for witnesses. So Councilman Ertel, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here this morning, and what an honor it is to follow Senator Van Hollen. So I feel very privileged. I wanted to just echo our support at the County Council for Bill, I think, 1495. We are seeing an immense amount of Virginia tags in a lot of our communities. This may seem like a non-issue to some people, but I think it's a bigger issue than we give it credit for. Maryland estimates, MVA's estimating that there's 34,000 vehicles in Maryland that have Virginia tags on them. That equates to, if you just look at the registration fees alone, the average registration fee is about $150 per car. And at 34,000 cars, that's $5 million per renewal period. So that might be a 2-year period, but that's $5 million we're losing every 2 years. The other piece to this is we know that there's a lot of these smaller dealers that are in a lot of our neighborhoods that they have Virginia tags available at at their tag and title places right there on site. And we're losing sales revenue as well from sales tax, because they're buying the vehicle in Maryland, paying sales tax when they register their car in Virginia, That's to the tune of about $5 to $8 million per year that we're losing in sales revenue in Maryland. Another issue with the Virginia tags is no camera ticket reciprocity. So we don't know how that affects us, whether people are, amassing a bunch of tickets that they're not paying, whether they're flaunting our, we've spent all this time on traffic calming and camera ticketing, and you have a segment of the population that may just not pay attention to those laws because they're not going to, if they can rack up tickets, and Virginia's not going to flag their registration. In Maryland, if you get tickets, at least you get a flag fee. And then we also believe that people have amassed a bunch of tickets and then they'll re-register their car in Virginia to avoid paying the flag fees and the fines that they owe. So there's a lot of implications here. The other thing too that we don't necessarily think about for years, and Virginia's closing this loophole as of July 1, they now have an insurance requirement. Prior to this, you could pay into a compulsory fund that basically gave you, I guess, liability coverage if you hit someone in their fund. But it didn't give you coverage for the car itself. But again, if we have instances where people are hitting vehicles that are insured and they don't have coverage, that eventually increases the uninsured motorist pool, which we all pay for because every insurance company is going to raise their, or Maryland gives them a mandate. You got to increase your fund payment. So this law will just simply give us another tool to potentially enforce this. I don't know that it's going to completely solve the problem. But I think we need to go further in the legislature about clamping down on this because I think it's a real problem. And just in Baltimore County, those figures I gave, now I know they're statewide, but we spend $22 million a year to pave our roads in Baltimore County. We should be spending about $44 to $66 million a year just to get to some semblance of having roads that are in somewhat decent shape. And the state highway funds were cut back in 2009. They've never really been reinstated. And here's another, set of revenue that we're not realizing with people using our roads, but not paying their fair share of the cost. So like I said, I support the bill, and I hope you will too. And like I said, I think it's a bigger problem than we make it out to be. And in these tight times, we need all the dollars we can, flowing towards Maryland and not going to Virginia coffers. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Councilman. We have a couple of other witnesses that were listed. I just want to be sure that they're not here online and I'm not seeing them on my screen. We have Josh Sines, McKinley Robinson, and Elizabeth Newton. Are any of those people here to testify? All right, seeing no response there. We'll now go to questions. Because I cut it off earlier, I saw a series of hands in a certain order, so I'm going to call these people to see if they still have a question. Delegate Guyton, you were the first one with your hands up in the previous iteration of this. Do you still have a question?
I did not have my hand up. I'm sorry.
Okay. When Delegate Naraku was making his original presentation, I thought I saw your hand up. Delegate Metzger, you had your hand up as well at that time, sir.
I had my hand up, but our councilman did a great job explaining that 34,000 is a serious number that we really need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Ruth, you also had your hand up when we began the hearing.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now she has her hand up again, and she had her hand up then. My recording secretary, Delegate Pasteur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is concerning the other two bills that are just like this. In Baltimore City, Jackie Addison, for example, is doing Virginia. Denny Tavares is doing Virginia, and I think maybe North Carolina. So am I to understand each of you will be doing a local bill? Is that correct? Even if they're hitting some of the same states, and it seems like this is an issue beyond us. I agree with the councilman that this is far more serious than it might appear to be on the surface.
Delegate Naraki?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Delegate, yes, they are all local bills. I haven't seen Delegate Tavares's bill, but I have had an opportunity to work extensively with Delegate Addison. It is in a very similar, nearly identical, other than changing Baltimore County to Baltimore City posture. And we're both working together. We think it's important, Delegate Addison and I, to have a regional approach to this. Councilman Ertel, for instance, represents a community like many others that he's seen significant issues in areas close to the Baltimore County and Baltimore City line. We're concerned that if a bill were to move in Baltimore City to give this authority, and we didn't have this authority in Baltimore County, there could be individuals playing, jump across the line sort of situation here. So this puts us in I think, a good regional posture for both jurisdictions to have a similar authority.
Well, you might want to talk to the other delegate as well, because hers is a little further away. And that's why I asked, because it is really very expansive, if you will. So it's a good bill, but it seems to be pervasive beyond our areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Delegate. I see Delegate Cardin, a question from you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the bill. I love it. Councilman Ertel, are you working with the county? Is the county executive and the administration okay with the bill?
Delegate Ertel. Councilman Ertel, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the county exec stance on it is. That's a good question. I know the county council all signed a letter in support of it.
Question's a relevant one. And we have Amanda Carr online. Delegate Cardin, finish your question, but then we'll go to her next.
And the other question is really for Delegate Naraki. I love this idea. In fact, I think we did something similar dealing with it was analogous, I guess, not really with boats, and when purchasing boats and registration and making sure that people weren't immediately registering them when even they purchased them in Maryland, they would register them in Florida or whatever, and they would avoid the Maryland sales tax. I think it was about 20 years ago we did that bill. We may want to look at different tools to be able to access or make sure that we don't lose those funds that we think we can. So I love it. So thank you.
Delegate Naraki, if you want to respond to that, you can, or if it's just a commentary, we can leave it at that. It's up to you.
Mr. Chair, I'll just say thank you to Delegate Cardin. I have been having discussions with the county executive's office, and I see Amanda's on, so I'll let her respond to that point there.
I think this is a good moment for us to let the county tell us what their overall view of this bill is, or where they are in the process of considering it.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Naraki. The county has had conversations with Delegate Naraki on this legislation. I think we all are in agreement that this would be a benefit to the county to be able to enforce some of the issues that have popped up. We're grateful that Virginia has changed their insurance laws, so we will be seeing less of that concern. We did reach out to the police department to just make sure we can enforce this bill. There are some technical tricky parts to it. And I know we've left it general so that perhaps not just the police department will be involved, but code enforcement can be involved for vehicles parked on private property. So we are working with the sponsor to work through some of those technicalities and should be able to have an answer to him early next week. And I can send our position to everyone, or I'll send it to you, Chairman, and you can disperse to the members.
Justin is our wonderful conduit there. Delegate Long, I see your hand up. Delegate Long, can you unmute and ask your question, please? All right. So I don't think we have Delegate Long with us, even though his hand is up. So it doesn't. Oh,
Hello?
there you are, sir.
I had you muted twice. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, a lot of
Thank
people
you.
want to mute me in real life. Okay. So, you know, there you go.
I was talking about myself.
Yeah, I was doing this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Delegate Rocky, do you know if by them having Virginia tags, does it circumvent them have to have cars inspected? Because I've noticed that a lot of these cars that with Virginia tags shouldn't be on the road. I mean, cracked windshield, bumpers hanging off. I mean, they're in deplorable condition. You know, for a safety reason, I mean, are you aware, does this stop them from having to have a Maryland State inspection?
Mr. Chair, can I go ahead and answer that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Delegate Long, yes, it circumvents any Maryland rules with respect to inspections, emission standards, any of those kinds of rules that you would typically think about that would be associated with the MVA or other parts of MDOT would be circumvented here with these Virginia tags. Or any other, if New Hampshire becomes the next, that would also circumvent. So Maryland laws would be circumvented.
Well, thank you for that answer, because I know from my experience, it always seems like a safety issue. Every time I get near a tag that has Virginia on it, I try to get away from them because they're a hazard. A lot of them are hazards.
Thank you, Delegate Long. That's good safety issue for us to keep in mind as we're driving around the Beltway. I don't see any other hands up. I do have a question of my own. I heard reference to a letter that was signed by the councilman. We have 7. Have all 7 council members signed on to this letter?
Mr. Chair, I think 5 of 7 have signed on currently. I frankly believe that probably all 7 may eventually sign the letter. Just for a lack of time here, I wasn't expecting this to get pulled out of rules this week, and it got kind of quick, so we were quickly kind of passing some support around, but we may have all 7 in the coming days.
But not at this time, right?
Not at this time, so
Okay.
5 out of 7 currently.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, well, we have no more questions, so this concludes the hearing on this bill. I'm assigning this bill to the Community Affairs Subcommittee to consider. Sounded like some of the questions might lead to some amendment for consideration if that's necessary. And so once they consider that and bring it up, we will certainly consider it for a vote next week. That concludes the bill hearings. Is there anything for the good of the order before we adjourn today? Okay, I have one. Next week is after crossover on Wednesday, the 20th. Without going into too much detail online, I'm going to tell you that we're going to have a delegation gathering. And so if you want to put a hold on your calendar for next Wednesday, the 20th at 4 p.m., you won't have to walk far to get to it. And more details will follow. Anyone else? Okay, with that, we will be adjourned. I thank you all for your attention and for your hard work, and I'll see you on the floor.